So I'll be joined on the podcast this week by John Hayes to discuss Cork's exit for the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship at the hands of Dublin at the weekend. I suppose, John, it's kind of a weird feeling. Like last year against Louth, you were obviously angry after the defeat. They went out of the championship last year. This year, they kind of fell on their shields. They went out with a 3-point loss against Dublin in Croke Park. You kind of have to be proud of the players, judging by that, but ultimately it is an exit.
Yeah, and look, I suppose that's what it boils down to, is that we haven't gone any further, and we've fallen at the preliminary quarterfinal again. Like 100% correct that the performance was light years ahead of what they produced last year against Louth. There was a lot to be proud of and a lot to be positive about from last Sunday, but I'd imagine that means very little to John Cleary and his management team, and in particular, and look, when I was doing my column, I would have referenced it, and I've referenced it a few times in this year and the last couple of years. Looking at Ian Maguire, Brian Hurley, Rory Dean, Sean Powter, Micheál Martin. There's a few more, Matty Taylor. These guys who have given an awful lot to Cork football over the last decade and more. For some of them, I see like Ian, Brian, and Rory all completed 100 appearances there. Pretty recently got presentations for their 100 appearances, but they've got nothing tangible to show for it. No success, no material success in a Cork football jersey, and I thought, like, you could see it in Maguire's reaction. It was captured by the cameras just as the final whistle went, and it was just a man, I'd say, beyond frustrated now at this stage. And like, you're right. I mean, the problem wasn't last Saturday as such. The problem was, say, performances like the performance against Meath and Navan. Like Meath, they're no mugs. We'll see how they go against Galway this weekend, but obviously they're no mug. They've beaten Kerry and Dublin this year, so they're not a team that we could be taking for granted or anything else like that. But it was just a pattern of really going for it and playing really well when there was low expectations against some of the bigger guns in the country. But when it came to games that were more 50-50 or even where we were slight favourites, we just didn't produce often enough in the last couple of years. And that's ultimately why we ended up with 2 away quarterfinals in a row as well, So that means you're on the back foot. The system is obviously, it's the last year that the system will be in place, and it certainly had its flaws. And certainly in the sense that a team could possibly get through having only drawn maybe 1 of the 3 games and been over the course of the championship of 5 or 6 games having 1 win and 1 draw or something like that and getting through. It had its flaws, but there was something riding on pretty much every game. And for Cork, it's the opening group game against Meath that will probably provoke the most regret, as well as, to be fair, if we look back at it, the first game against Kerry, just the way we got the momentum after Paddy Clifford's red card, and to go in front so late in that game with a man advantage and with the crowd behind them and with the momentum, that's one that they're going to look back on and say it was a chance that got away. Then they could have gone through the front door, hopefully win a Munster final, and go straight into the last 8 as well. So, go straight, get a better draw in the groups and everything else like that. So, look, there'll be big regrets. Last Saturday was far from a bad performance. It was a good effort, but I think hearing the words good effort and hard luck and everything else like that, it's kind of it's worthless to that group at the moment, to a lot of them anyway. So yeah, there'll be big frustration, but I think it's more to do with some of the non-performances in both last year and this year earlier than kind of, like you said, going out in their shield against Dublin and Croke Park.
Yeah, exactly. But I suppose as well, like last year was littered with a few bad performances here or there. The game in Skeen, especially against Louth, first few games of the league. I remember we lost 3 games in a row at the start of the league campaign. This year, in a way, I know there was games against Down where Cork probably should have won that game in Park Esler. The Meath game, as you mentioned, in Navan as well. Is there an argument to say that this year, I know we went Cork went out on the same stage, But is there an argument to say that this year was much better performance-wise than last season?
I think much better is probably a stretch. I think there was periods of really good football that the team produced, primarily against Kerry and Dublin. So I think the league was a similar story. Another poor start putting us on the back foot, and meaning we kind of had to get our act together late in the day just to avoid relegation. We shouldn't be putting ourselves in that position, and I think they'll probably accept that. Like you said, you referenced the down game after the poor start to the league. Obviously, we went away on the training camp. They got their act together coming back, and then into the last game against Cavan, I suppose that was a kind of a performance where you're going away to an Ulster team, and they produced well on the day, and it kind of set them up well going into the championship. But ultimately, the league was mid-table in the league again, and the target should have been for the league to get promotion. You see Roscommon and Monaghan in the final, and we've seen we're well capable of beating Roscommon, whereas we didn't turn up and perform against them at home in the league, losing by 14 points. And that was probably a low point for us, and then a high point for Roscommon, who didn't kick on from it. We ended up only 1 point behind Roscommon, 1 point behind a promotion place. And you referenced the down game. There was an opportunity lost there, and non-performance at home to Roscommon. So that would have been another opportunity for some of those players to get to Croke Park for a league final and maybe claim a trophy as well. So, yeah, the league was kind of much similar to last year. Poor start, get it together, but finish mid-table. So, kind of no progress or anything, no major regression in that respect either. But then, like, moving into championship, again, took care of Limerick, and then we had the great game against Kerry, which, as I said, they'll be looking back at as a missed opportunity. As exciting as it was, and as much as a lot of Cork people were very positive afterwards for putting it up to them, like I said, that's not something that the players themselves and the management will take too much solace from when they look back in the season after all. So yeah, look, I think it's more the same from last year. Good performances against big teams, but not taking opportunities when they come our way. And like you can't say we've regressed madly, but we can't say we've progressed madly. I do agree that there was better football played this year, and maybe I think that's across the board probably too, Matthew. If you look at all the football that's been played, teams are playing better football. There was a lot of frustration last year with how Cork were playing against the pack defences. And the tactics of heading for the sideline all the time and that kind of football. And when we played quick football, and I thought against Roscommon there was a couple of passages of play as well where we used the foot pass to really good effect and move the ball quickly and that kind of thing, which is another string that we need to add to our bow, because Cork are a great, powerful running team, and when they get a run at you, and whether it's Rory Dean, Sean Powder coming off the bench, or some of these guys, they can put teams under a lot of trouble. But we brought some guys into the team this year, like Sean McDonald, who've added a better kicking threat as well. So there are positives, but I mean, if you take it overall, ultimately we've kind of stuck in mid-table in Division 2 and failed to progress past the last 12 in the championship. So yeah, look, touching on the positives again, we have found a few players this year, I think. Sean Brady, Sean McDonald, Sean Walsh, all the Seans, but they all have added something at different times. So there has been fines, but look, like I said, some of the senior players in particular won't take any comfort from that.
You mentioned the fines there. There was a lot of them this year, to be fair to John Cleary. Brought them into the panel earlier on this year, especially with the likes of Stephen Sherlock not committing this year, Fionn Hurley, and all them players as well. Kevin Flahive obviously going out to Australia. Is that more of an onus on Cleary to bring those players in when the likes of Flahive and Sherlock weren't in the panel this year?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one. I've been kind of in that situation myself where you're maybe a bit part player in the squad, and that the effort is colossal. And like Flaheeve might be a different situation because he's not in the country. Stephen Sherlock is one, all right, when the 2 point arc came in, and we don't know what happened. We don't know, maybe the management did absolutely everything they could, or sometimes management say, look, it's not up to us, go chasing players to want to play for Cork. You either want it or you don't. Maybe Stephen Sherlock's looked at it and said, I want to target a county championship with the Bars. That's possibly in his head. That's where his priority, where he sees realistic, tangible chances of success in Cork County Championship and Munster Championship and even All Ireland Championship for the Bars. Maybe that's where he decided to prioritise. Like stepping back from it and not knowing what was involved in any conversations, you would think that going after him and convincing him to be a part of it this year would have been a priority. And like I said, maybe they did, but you could have, like in the drawing game against Kerry, with a couple of opportunities outside the 40-metre arc, with dead balls and from play, and you'd fancy Stephen to kick most of those kind of scores. Even the effort that Sean McDonald dropped short against Dublin on Saturday evening as well. That's another one that you would have fancied would be well within Stephen Sherlock's range. So, look, we can maybe dwell sometimes too much on players who aren't there. Ultimately, it's about the guys who did go for it and who went at it. And look, John Cleary and his management team did everything they could, and the players did everything they could. We just didn't produce enough on the year again, and it's another frustrating year.
You mentioned the Sean McDonald effort outside the 45, obviously the arc kick. Like with Micheál Martin, obviously kicking a 45 earlier on in the game, which I've never seen him do it up until last Saturday, and he converted over the bar. To be fair, could that be kind of thing that Cork go for next year to get Micheál Martin and more kicks outside the arc?
Yeah, and that was a funny one because at the time, look, Sean McDonald had been off for an injury substitution for a few minutes, had played a long game. Look, has been very good all year, but it wasn't his best day out. He hadn't scored on the day. Micheál had nailed one in the first half and nailed it like with plenty to spare. The way it's kind of down to technique with some players. Micheál, the one he got in the first half was straight in front of the goal, and you can kind of apply that kind of direct technique where you drive a straight ball from the center of the pitch. That one was more to the wing, and maybe Micheál didn't feel comfortable that was a suitable kick for him. I don't know why he didn't come up. Someone said when they saw it, they seemed to beckon him, and he wasn't keen on it. Cathal Manny was another one. He was fresh off the bench. We know he's got a boot in him, but maybe he's missed a few opportunities this year at different times as well. So confidence maybe wasn't there with him either. So look, Sean McDonald's a good kicker. He got the nod to do it, but I think at that stage of game for a wing forward who hasn't scored, who was put in a big shift, who's been off the pitch with getting assessed for injury, it was probably a big ask for him to put it over. So yeah, like the lack of a place kicker to come in and put those over at the end of the games, because they seem to crop up several times at the end of games. Those longer range frees when teams are getting tired and starting to foul. If we had a better conversion rate on those frees and a better conversion rate on our goal chances for the season, we might have a different story. We might be looking forward to a quarter final this weekend instead, just as the championship starts to really get serious. So it's a lot of what ifs, but yeah, look, I'm sure the management team and the players, with the management team in particular, will be regrouping. No one knows exactly what John Cleary's intentions are, what his backroom team's intentions are, but I'm sure they're regrouping now in the next week or two to have a look at it, look back over their 3.5 seasons, I suppose, in a whole, and figure out whether they have the appetite really to go and do it again, given everything that's involved in going into it.
And you mentioned there the shooting accuracies from frees, and even the last few games in the second half alone against Roscommon, their shooting accuracy was 75%. In the game against Dublin overall, it was 73%. But then in the game against Kerry, particularly in extra time in the second half, I think it was under 50%. It was well under that. So again, does that kind of come back to consistency levels, and that kind of stat needs to be at a consistent level from next season onwards?
Yeah, and with 70 plus is excellent for any team, and they really were. They were very efficient. Like you said, they played very well against Dublin. That's like if you take it 4 points down after 5 minutes, struggling, like Dublin started that like they were going to blow Cork away. They were really, really worried early on. Paddy Small was doing wreck. In fairness to Neil Lorden, he settled. Paddy Small still had a good game, but Lorden settled in it, did well with him. Restricting him as best he could. But 4 points down after 5 minutes on the clock, and it steadied the ship and pulled it back and go ahead. And there was a big one. Cork went 4 points up just before half time, and Dublin were kicking out. Cluxton targeted Brian Howard out to his right, long kick out, and Colm O'Callaghan came up, kind of strong fist through the back. Got clean fist in it, and it broke to Mark Cronin, who was inside the defence and would have been gone. But the referee penalised Cullum for contact in the back of Brian Howard. It was one of those ones that, he didn't push him in the back with his hands because his hand was up. It was more with the body, and a lot of referees wouldn't blow it, but Sean Hurson blew it, and Dublin ended up going down the other end of the pitch and kicking a 2-pointer from Sean Bugler. So instead of having the opportunity of going maybe 5 points or 6 points even up at the other end, Dublin reduced the deficit to 2. So that was a big moment. And then start of the second half again, similar to the first, Dublin get the stronger start, get a couple of points on the board to bring it at level before Brian Howard got his goal. Cracking goal, but again, looking back on it, you'd be very disappointed from a management point of view that it came with a clash of heads. Ian Maguire and O'Cuffey Byrne, I think, and play stopped. Dublin have a free that you can't shoot from, can't put it over the bar 35 yards out. Like, your defence has to be set there and protecting your goal, but all it was a pop ball to Howard. He turned Sean McDonald, got inside the cover straight through, and brilliant finish. In fairness to the top corner, great goal. But you'd be very disappointed to concede such a soft goal from a free in that position. Fair to Cork again, great response, came back, few points in a row, and it took the lead again midway through the second half, and ended up kind of, the game was level, I'd say, with about 8 or 10 minutes left on the clock, and again 2 or 3 big moments, kickouts that we didn't win, frees given against us. I think John Cleary was very annoyed. There was another one on Colm O'Callaghan. There was also one where there was a long kick out, went on the floor, and ended up Cian Murphy gathered possession, and like the Cork guys got in around them, but they had their hands out, 3 of them with their bodies, and like Murphy had no chance to play it, but it was good. It was a good swarm tackle, and the referee for some reason blew the whistle and said, "I'm going to throw this ball up." It should have been a free to Cork for overcarrying, but he for some reason said he had no chance to play it or something to that effect. Just threw the ball up instead. Dublin get a free from that, work it down, and get a point to I think put them two in front at the time, and they just kind of held it out from there. So it was fine margins last Saturday. The opportunities were there. Cork played very well, but as we said, probably last Saturday wasn't the issue. It's days that have gone before where Cork didn't perform at that same level. And like you said, consistency. Consistency is, since I was involved, but particularly over the last 10 years, everyone has been banging on about Cork footballers being inconsistent, really putting up to Kerry one day and then falling short, whether it's against the Roscommon or Louth or anyone. Whoever is in charge in the next year, whether it's John and his team or anyone else, that'll be a big thing to try and address. But there's no simple solution to it either. Like, you'd have to imagine they'd have addressed the mental side of that. It would suggest, it's a mentality issue that we're well able to raise our game for the big guns and really go toe-to-toe with them and take them all the way. And then we're flat against the so-called lesser lights and that kind of thing. So that would suggest it's mentality, but that should have been addressed a long time ago. And I imagine it has been addressed to say, Like, we cannot afford to go out and be anything less than 100%, no matter who the opposition is. How many times have we lost against teams at our level or just below our level? They've had plenty warnings in that sense, not to be complacent against anyone, you know. So, yeah, it's more to do, I think, with just our ability, or I suppose our habit of playing at the opposition's level. Maybe it's like, you know, the bigger teams, there's more space. They're going toe to toe with us, so it suits the way we play football. Whereas certainly in previous seasons, when a team sat back, and even though when a team sets back with a 10 or 11 bank, that we struggle to break those teams down. And maybe that's how we address it, as opposed, because surely they all know mentally at this stage that, you know, it can't be just a case of turning up and trying to beat teams that we think we should be better than.
Just one final thing, John. Obviously, the season's over now. Obviously, attention will be going towards the 2026 campaign. I know there's the club championship coming up and all that from the start of July. But John Cleary, like, his 4-year term is up now. If he does want to take on another term as Cork boss, do you think he's earned the right to have another go at being the Cork manager, to prolong his tenure as Cork football manager?
Yeah, I would. Look, I do, in the sense that, look, there hasn't been the progress that we've seen after year one, or given it, say, the first full year was 2023, and quite a, you know, beating Roscommon and Mayo in the championship, and, you know, exiting against Derry, not a great game, but we weren't a million miles off it. I look quite positive. And since then, we haven't progressed. Like the last 2 years, like there was a little bit of regression last year, and this year we've stagnated. Even if some of the performances would have given a bit, you know, a lot more pleasure to Cork football people, you know, to watch the way they played against Dublin and that kind of exit. No one's going to go be too critical of the team after that performance compared to, say, Louth last year. So look, there hasn't been the progression and the results. Ultimately, there hasn't been the results that we would have hoped for, and everyone else. But I think John has done enough over his career, and the players, and when they played well this year, and the signs that they showed against Kerry and against Dublin, Cavan in the league, certain games like that, the players seem to be behind him. So I do think he has enough, and I don't see a plethora of candidates out there queuing up either who are better than John Cleary. That's just to be straight about it, you know. I think that, you know, it's well flagged. You know, it's widely thought within Cork football that the problems go far deeper than whoever's in charge of the Cork senior football team. There's not the results and players coming through at underage that we would like to see. Having said, look, Cork is a big county, and we can still find footballers. You saw it this year. Look, I mentioned them already with Brady, McDonald, Walsh, all these guys. So there is still footballers out there. But yeah, I think John Cleary has earned the right to make his own decision. And like last year, I suppose, to be straight, I would have said straight up that I didn't think Kevin Walsh had brought enough to the table at that stage. Look, they backed him, and I think performances, the football we played has been better at times. There's still a lot of frustration that we are so reliant on, you know, the overload kick out to one side of the pitch, and our inability to kind of mix that up to take the pressure off us from time to time. But yeah, look, I don't see a queue of candidates that are better than John Cleary to take it forward. I think it's up to himself. I think if he wants to go again, he'll probably be given the option. It's maybe, you could always argue that freshening things up, but look, in the backroom side, I think Jim O'Donoghue came in to freshen things up a little bit there on that sense. So, yeah, look, I know that's a long-winded answer, but ultimately I would say, yeah, John Cleary has earned the right to make his own decision on it. But we'll see. It is a lot of work. It is a huge commitment. And he's done pretty much 3.5 years at it now as well. So We wait and see. But I think it will be ultimately his own decision. Yeah.
See what happens in the weeks to come. Obviously, thanks, John, for coming on to the podcast, and yeah, thanks very much.
No problem, Matthew. Thanks.